business architecture is all about understanding value and understanding the relationship between how the business works and the value that it delivers. I'm wondering, is this in some way a modern take on organisational development and the softer aspects of that?
There is an element of that, absolutely is an element of that. And I think I was asked a question once, which was at the time it took me back a bit, but when I thought about it, I thought absolutely perfect question, which was, how do you represent culture in your business architecture? So if you give me some models of some business architecture models, how are you representing culture? And actually culture is a really important thing to get. You can have a fantastic transformation process, you can have fantastic vision and mission statements, but unless your organisation has the culture to really make the difference, make the change, you're up against it. So absolutely, I could argue that business architecture is broadening out more and more, but actually it's just becoming there's a synergy between a number of different disciplines where the boundaries are becoming blurred, and I think quite rightly so.
I can imagine that when you're involved in change, organisational change, and when you're connecting different functions, the IT function, perhaps the project and programme management function, other functions, that there's a strong element of politics and power in there. Is that something that a business architect has to address, and if so, how?
Yes, has to address, and occasionally gets burnt by it as well. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's important. I think the fact that people are very passionate about what they do, I think is really important. It shows that they really value what they do. And so yes, politics is important. But I think the thing for me is about understanding the different perspectives that the various stakeholders have. So project and programme managers, for example, very, very delivery focused, and quite rightly, but they're delivering something very specific, but it's in a broader context. And so part of the business architect's role is to be able to understand that broader context and ensure that that delivery is actually making the contribution that's intended for it, so that the return on the investment is absolutely appropriate. So yes, the role of the architect is quite often a bit of a mediator, but that's just part of the role. That's important.
It's interesting when you talk about project and programme managers as an example, that I can imagine that they have particular hang-ups and needs, and that is perhaps somewhere where the business architect can help. So you're coming in as an aid and a facilitator and an enabler, rather than somebody who's telling them how to do their job.
Absolutely. I would never try and tell a project or programme manager how to do their job. But yes, it is important. And for me, it's about teamwork. It's about project and programme management is part of the life cycle of change, but it's not the whole life cycle. It's a part of it. And so the idea of the business architect is to be able to articulate what the longer term intentions are.
If we're looking at a medium or even a larger size company, what kind of size is this function? Are we talking about one business architect? Are we talking about a whole practice of business architects?
Yes, yeah. It depends, really. I think you could have a function with 20, 30, 40, 50 business architects. You can have a function with one business architect. And if I took those two extremes, what would the difference be? The difference would be, with the one, you would focus on the things which are the most valuable to the organisation, because that's all you can do. You really want to generate the best value. I don't think there's one ideal answer. What I would say, though, is my experience is always to start small. Start small and generate the value. Focus on really what's important, and then build out from there as necessary. But starting with a large function of 20, 30 people, I think you can very early on, very quickly start looking for work, rather than saying, actually, where is it we really need to be taking this organisation and helping the organisation to get to.
Right.
So not an exact number for you, but I think the sentiment there is on the value generation.
Okay. If I can ask you a particular question about the book, who have you written it for? Have you written it for business architects? Have you written it for project and programme managers? Have you written it for senior managers? Who's it really aimed at?
It's aimed at all of those. And I think one of the motivations for me coming up with the idea for the book in the first place was because I felt that each of those stakeholder groups needed some help in understanding where architecture sat, where business architecture sat, and that it wasn't there to compromise what they're doing, but actually to help them what they're doing, and to help ultimately to help businesses generate value. So it's intended for all of those audiences, because each has a need for business architecture. But the boundaries were never very clear about where business architecture was, and where you get the distinction between business architecture, for example, and program or portfolio management. So the idea is that it's for all of them.
Right, interesting, and that suggests that indeed the definition is fairly fluid. I mean, I've seen some elements of what a PMO might do might relate to what in other companies might be delivered by a business architect.
Yes, and it's not exact, and I think that's one of the good things of it. You can't force a particular discipline on an organisation, and I think in different organisations the role of a business architect may be quite different. In some, it is very focused on absolutely complete delivery, so the end-to-end life cycle to ensure from concept to delivery through to realisation of business value, that the architect is involved. In others, the architect may be involved just at a more strategic level, for example, and not participating in or responsible or accountable for delivery of specific change. And I think that's right. I think it's how the organisation feels most comfortable, so you don't just impose a particular discipline or role in an organisation.
How do you begin to recognise the impact and measure the effectiveness of business architecture? Because it is a process, a tool, a solution, and I can imagine that other departments, other functions would be very happy to seize the success that's achieved and say, that's our success, and leave the business architect out in the cold.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And it's an ongoing challenge. Quite often people will expect to see a return on their investment in a fairly short period of time, 3-6 months. Of course, when we're looking at architecture, business architecture from an organisational viewpoint, the benefits can be years off. And I think one of the problems is people see business architecture as a cost, rather than seeing it, so they look at it from that viewpoint, and financially they look at it from that viewpoint, rather than looking at it from a value benefit perspective and making the investment on that side. So part of the problem is that the benefits realisation part of the life cycle isn't done well at all. Generally, very, very few organisations do it, and even fewer do it well. So it is a constant challenge, and I think part of the success comes through the relationship management, the building up of relationships, and being seen to be somebody, a business architect, somebody who is almost like a trusted advisor, someone who you would go to when you have a problem, when you want to understand where you can generate more value, and get a seat at the right level within the organisation to really make effective change.
Right. It sounds as if part of that element is trust and confidence, and in a sense oiling the relationships and the working practices within the organisation so that things are working smoothly, people are working together, people are engaged, and that's as much as a benefit as some of the project and programme outcomes that you might be trying to enable.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Graham and I talk about in the book is weaving business architecture into the fabric of the organisation. And that's really one of the core elements of the book, and which is why we draw on the different types of stakeholders and the different life cycles as well. And we believe that business architecture should actually have a representation in all of those. And so it's absolutely important. Business architecture is just a part of the team. It's nothing. It's nothing that's going to be successful in its own right. It's part of the team, and we try and emphasise that.
Good. Okay. Thank you.